Hey guys, it's Tomi from GoodTomiCha. If you are new here, I am a fashion and lifestyle blogger on the gram, and here on YouTube I like to share a little bit more about influencer culture and blog tips, and today I'm going to talk a little bit more about what influencers will not tell you about working full-time. I recently shared a video about my triumphs of being full-time for a year after blogging for 5 years and what that looks like for me, and it was incredible. It was really affirming to be able to have that success in that first full-time year and feel like this is what I'm meant to do. However, of course, with all of the pros and the joy and the great moments that you see that in the highlight reel that is social media, there are a lot of other things that influencers do not share. One, just because it's like not as fun, it's not as sexy, but two, because I think the harsh realities of it just don't make their job look as cool, and I think that's what puts a lot of people in bad places financially, which ends up hurting a lot of influencers who are then having to fake it that they're super successful and all this stuff when they're really drowning in debt.
Well, here's the tea.
Or, just other hardships. So I'm here to share a little bit more about those downsides and help you, because I know there's a lot of you who are watching this trying to figure out if becoming a full-time blogger or just trying to figure out what that transition will look like for you is something that you want to do and to make those next steps. So I want to be as transparent as possible when it comes to all of this, because it was from content like this or blog posts or talking to other people who were full-time in this industry that really helped form my own decision, along with, my own gut feelings and having talks with my husband and praying and all of that, but making sure that I was able to really grasp the full picture of what I was getting myself into. Speaking of my husband, let's just jump right into that. So I have the blessing of living on a dual income. So my husband is a chemical engineer. He works with a production plant here in the Charlotte area, and so of course that's going to come with a little bit more of like a high earning income. And so that's one of the reasons that I shared in my last video that I was actually offered a really high paying job in San Francisco to work right out of grad school, and it kind of matched what my husband was making here. And so it was one of the pros cons things that I was debating of what would that look like then if we're all on my own salary there, like would he be able to get a job that would match, and since it kind of goes further here because it's lower cost of living, all of that, what does that look like? But regardless, I am able to talk it out with someone else who is bringing in a steady income that does not rely on trends in the retail space or how many people bought products through my links. So it kind of makes me feel more confident to make that jump and that leap to be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go out on my own, because I did have that security blanket of having my husband here with me, and knowing that there's always going to be the steadiness of his job, Lord willing, in comparison to me, where I kind of have a freelancer gig, right? And my contracts, just because I pay and do the work for something, does not mean that I'm getting paid up front, just depending on what type of projects that I'm working on at the time. So having that really does make a difference, and I'm sure you guys know that, but I think that is something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle when people share that they are full-time, or it looks like they're making a bunch of money and all this stuff. A lot of times they're able to either not take a salary from their business and they're just feeding it back into their business for years on end. People have debt. I personally am still paying off school loans. Me and my husband both are. And car things, and a lot of people will have the opportunities to either be really blessed financially from parents, having full rides to school, or living in a lower cost of living area like Charlotte. So these are all factors that kind of go into figuring out when you can become full-time. So it's not necessarily like, oh, I've put in 5 years, then I should be able to go full-time by now. Everyone is in a very different state of life during this journey as an entrepreneur, and so that's really important to keep in mind, that you should not compare it, because all of us are going through these things, and it's best for you to figure out what works for you in terms of time frame in your own financial situation. Something else that people don't really take into mind while we're talking about finances is the taxes for being self-employed are very high, and when you're getting that revenue, it's really great because you're like, wow, look at all this money coming in. But the amount that you have to put aside is quite a lot, and again, speak to your accountant on it. I'm not going to give out like numbers and all that stuff, but you do have to keep that in mind whenever you're doing your own taxes, just because they're coming straight out from you as a business. One thing that I really wish that people talked about more is healthcare. I think the reason why they don't is because they are blessed to live a typically healthy life. They might have something here or there, like a short-term ailment, but for the most part, a lot of your influencers who start out are younger. It might be before kids or like right after kids, and they've like just left their job to be able to come full-time, so they're not really able to know what that looks like before making that transition of having to rely simply on a freelancer approach to health insurance. So for me, it was very much kind of like a rude awakening because I do have a pre-existing condition, a autoimmune disease, I have MS, and so going through the insurance process looks a lot different for me than it does for someone with like average health. My medications without insurance cost around $3,000 a month. And so finding something that works within that, and also like with your income, and then, you know, you don't necessarily have like a strict number of what it can be because it's fluctuating all the time, and what that really works with, like just trying to do that whole search process of finding your own health insurance as a freelancer content creator is a lot. And so that's something you definitely want to look into before you make that shift into becoming a full-time content creator. In addition to your savings and all that stuff, is if your insurance things get a little crazy, which for me it definitely did, how much time and funds do you have saved up to make sure that you're going to be covered during that if your insurance decides to like not kick in. I stopped being on my parents' insurance at 26, and so then I went to my own of now being full-time, and during that whole transition it was really difficult to kind of figure it all out, and there were, for some reason, months even after my insurance had been added, my medications were having all of these issues for some reason, and I was having to pay some of those medical costs out of pocket. Not the full $3,000, but very, very high numbers. There was a month that I had to pay close to $2,000 for my medication.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. And I think that's something that like not a lot, but some people just have never had that experience. They don't think about that when sharing it with others. Of course, my everyday medical care costs are pretty low with my standard insurance that I have. Just going to the doctor, my regular prescription refills. I got my birth control stuff taken care of while I was still on my parents' insurance like years ago. But when it comes to specialty pharmacy things and anything within that line, you definitely want to make sure you do as much research as possible before making the jump to becoming a full-time influencer. Another thing within financials are your benefits, your savings. You have to kind of be responsible for your own 401k, anything for your retirement fund. It just takes a lot more planning. I don't want this to be discouraging at all. I just wanted to make sure that you have all the information up front so you know what to look out for and what to plan, so that you don't make that jump and you're just kind of left being like, oh my gosh, I'm in over my head. Having some type of plan of making sure, what does my income strategy look like? Am I going to be making my money, like my bread and butter from one thing, but then I also have all these other streams? Want to make sure you're doing affiliates, you have some type of product or service, you are doing ads, you're creating content on a consistent basis. From all that with your income, you're doing freelancing things, but you're also investing in stocks for retirement things, you are putting it in bonds, you have your own little plans of how much you're taking out and putting into your savings. Because there's no like corporate overlord person who's taking that out for you and matching your contribution, none of that. Like, it's all on you. So it takes a very responsible person, which is me now, after kind of figuring it out and talking to a lot of people, my accountant, financial advisors, whatever, to make sure that you are doing what you can and planning so that as a freelancer, you're able to kind of map that out of what it looks like of your own retirement ages and goals. I think for me, one of the biggest reasons why I didn't want to go full-time initially was just because of how isolating it is. I am an extrovert and I thrive on being with other people. I love working in team settings. I love just collaborating and we're all talking about different creative ideas and kind of just having this like joint we did it moment at the end of some type of project. And you don't really get that when you are a full-time influencer. Yes, you might develop a team later on, but most likely when you're first starting out, it's probably just you, maybe another photographer, maybe another blogger that you like work with occasionally who's in town and you like meet up at a coffee shop, but that's it. For the most part, especially in 2020, I was at home alone just typing away or doing Instagram stories by myself, and I missed having that interaction. And while yes, it was nice to not have to worry about it from like a health and safety standpoint, it did really take a toll on my mental health for a while because I just wasn't seeing people. We lived in like an apartment for like the first half of 2020, and at the time it was fine because when we first moved in there, my goal was to work in an office somewhere else, 5 days a week like normal, and I didn't really need a separate blogging space besides the dining table because I'd mostly be doing it on the weekends. However, once lockdown started and I realized I'd be in that apartment for that long, and it's like 700 square feet, and it's just like, move from living room to kitchen to living room, and it was kind of dark in there, and I was just like, I cannot do this. So I'm very thankful that we were able to move to the townhome that we're in now. We're still renting, but it's a lot more space. I have an office set up where I'm like a separate area. I can move from here, I can work in the dining room, I can work in the living room, I can work on patios, and there are like coffee shops and stuff like this. I'm able to get fresh air, and it's just a lot more conducive of a space. So I think also keep that in mind. One, are you okay mental health wise to be able to be more of alone and it be on you to do everything? But two, do you have some type of space set up? No, you don't have to have a designated area. It's not a necessity, but let me tell you, since moving in here has made it a lot easier for me to feel like I can create and make a mess and throw things and not have to clean stuff up immediately, where I can go and just eat dinner and hang out with my husband for the evening and then get to it in the morning and clean up and do what I need to do. And I think that's why you see a lot of influencers who struggle with mental health, because even though you are sometimes traveling with a lot of people, and I do think it's very different for people who are like out in LA and they're like TikTok houses, influencer houses, whatever. There's all these very different genres of influencer, right? So just keep that in mind throughout any of the content that I share, but also with this video. I do think that is why a lot of influencers who are more solo bloggers struggle mental health wise and focus so much on work of uploading always on, because then if they're not, then they're by themselves, and I think that can get kind of scary sometimes. And with that, even if you're not someone who's struggling necessarily with the isolating factor, working from your phone, working with anything that has Wi-Fi is very hard to turn it off. You feel like you have to constantly be working because you can't just scroll on social media for fun anymore. You might see, oh, hey, here's friends who are posting with this brand. Why didn't this brand reach out to me? Oh, they just got new stuff for their house. And I feel like this comparison game happens even for people who are not working in social media, but I feel like it can be heightened in this space as a content creator because it's your job. Like you have to constantly analyze your own content. So when there's just that downtime and you're scrolling, I at least personally have a really difficult time turning it off. So it's been very helpful to create a Finsta and just hang out on there whenever I'm trying to just like chill, or scroll on Twitter because I don't really do a lot of blogging things on Twitter. Anything within that kind of helps me relax more. I unfollow people that I don't need to follow who make me feel bad about myself because I'm like, oh, I wish I looked like them, or I wish my house was like them. Anything that helps create my space on the internet to be more healthy is what your priority should be, and it's definitely helped me. And there's also this thing that there's a need to be so open and transparent with your audience that there's no privacy anymore, and that you have to just keep giving so much of yourself that there's nothing left for you. And so creating boundaries is very important as a content creator, even if you're not full-time, because that's kind of where you can put a stop to where your work is and where life begins. Just because life is our work doesn't mean that work has to be our life. Does that make sense? There has to be a balance. You have to have boundaries of answering DMs, when you are able to answer your emails, or, you know, what you decide to share with your audience. Are you going to share your kids there? Are you going to say everything about your relationship with your spouse? You just have to figure out what works best for you. I know some people are a lot more comfortable sharing like every single thing about their life and body fluids and just crazy family drama, but that's not for me. And I think I realized that really early on, so I've just created my own boundaries when it comes to that. But I think a lot of people don't say that they struggle with that because that's what influencers are supposed to be. They're supposed to be like this relatable, friendly person and be like, oh my gosh, look at how vulnerable and open they are, and people reward it with likes and comments and shares, and so they feel like, okay, I need to keep giving more and more and more of myself, and it just ends up kind of spiraling into this toxic place. And so I think a lot of full-time influencers really do struggle with finding where to put that line, but it is so important to make sure that they're in place so that you don't feel like every day you have to give more of yourself until there's nothing left. Now, all of that to say, that was a lot of negatives, but I promise there's so many positives to being a full-time influencer as well. Again, I just want to make sure that everyone has the full picture when they're looking into this as more than a side hustle, but as a career. I love the job flexibility that I'm able to have. I love being my own boss. I love that I am able to work wherever, whenever, because all I need is a Wi-Fi connection. And I like being able to be creative and come up with new photo shoot concepts. And I do get to collaborate with a lot of different creators when, you know, COVID things aren't happening. But even now, I'm still able to DM them. We're messaging up stuff. I've worked with people recently for like food taste test videos. Could not say that word, food taste tests, and just stuff like that. There's definitely ways to be involved with your communities wherever you are. There are some type of influencer, content creator. I remember I always thought like, oh, I have to be in New York, I have to be in LA. That's not the case. It's really nice to know now that you can kind of be wherever and make it work for you as a career. I won't lie, there are the perks of getting the free things, some free trips, and those are all wonderful. But it's just like any other job where you have pros and cons. Even the people who wake up every day and say, I love my job, I can't believe I'm doing this, there are things that they don't like to do with their own job or negatives that they have to work with, but still just kind of go with it because the pros outweigh them and they love what they do, and I definitely love what I do. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you got something from this. If you have any questions on any of the negatives or whatever that I shared today, please let me know. If you are an influencer and you have, you know, thought about going full-time or you've experienced any of these, definitely drop it in the comments. If you liked this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel because I will definitely be coming out with more influencer tips, commentary, topics because I'm loving this and I'm glad you guys are liking it too. Thanks. Bye guys.